All right, hello everybody and welcome. Happy New Year. My name is Albert, founder of Albert's List, and you are here for our monthly jobs report, the bonanza where you get to hear how things are going in the state of the economy, how they affect your job search, and how worried you should be in totality. Albert's List, of course, we're a job search, side hustle, and AI education organization helping you become the most resilient that you can possibly be in your job search. And today we have Dr. White back for us to talk about the state of the economy and where things have been in the last month. And whether you've met Dr. White or not, I'm going to introduce you to him. So he is the Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning and a tenured full professor of finance at the University of New Mexico, Anderson School of Management. He's also the director of the $6 million student-run University of New Mexico Regents portfolio and leads a series of financial literacy projects in the community. He was awarded the 2022 Paul Bartlett Reemerging Promoter of Peace Award and is a recipient of the 2022 to 2023 New Mexico Changemakers Educational Fellowship. In addition to serving on the board of trustees of the $19 billion New Mexico Educational Retirement Board, Dr. White also serves as the treasurer of the board of the Cancer Support Community LA and chair of the Vols Collegiate Preparatory School. In addition to his PhD in finance from the University of Connecticut, Dr. White graduated summa cum laude from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth with a degree in finance. He has published 23 articles in finance and financial technology in the last few years, including articles in Physica A, the Journal of Corporate Finance, IEEE, Technological Forecasting and Social Change, and the Journal of Banking and Finance. With his students, he's co-authored Financial Literacy for Immigrants and Refugees, a free financial literacy handbook that has been translated into Spanish, Arabic, and Dari. And since 2020, Dr. White has been interviewed over 500 times by local and national media outlets on various economic and financial topics. So you may have very well seen him in the news as you have been reading about the state of the market. And he's here every month joining us to talk about the state of the economy and the state of the job market and what you should be following. So one more thing, this webinar is being recorded and we are also going to have the recording available to you. If you have any questions, use the webinar chat, use the Q&A function. We are all here for you. So without further ado, Dr. White, welcome back. We love having you here and we appreciate all your time. And
Thanks,
we know
Albert.
that after that bio, you are incredibly qualified to lead this presentation and we're looking forward to your insights.
I like that you really went gung ho on it, and I'm so grateful. I was joking about reading the whole thing. I'm taking
Well, I
two
think I might just
hours.
do it every time going forward.
No, don't do it
Just know
every
who you are.
time. No, it's the same thing. I gotta produce more. I gotta produce more things for it.
All right, you'll
Thank
be
you, Albert.
interviewed 501 times when we get you in February then.
I know. I'll be very precise. I'll be like 507. Every one of those. Each one of those is a line item on my CV, and each one of those it just adds the pages of it. You know, professors are the only place. I always tell my students when they're on the job market, make sure your resume is one page. We knew somebody when I graduated college that went into the same bank I went into.
Yeah.
He had a two-page resume. His nickname was Two Page for the rest of his like career. Good old two page. And
So
so do one
pages is
page.
your CV, just for reference sake.
Except if you're in academia, Albert, and then you can get away with a 54-page one, like I'm chilling with,
So
or like
is
a
your
hundred.
CV literally 54 pages?
It is literally 54 pages. I'm going to put this on there today. I'm going to put the meeting I was in with. You can put anything that happens. It's like a biography of the most boring parts of your life put in this space, and it's great.
Well, I mean,
Oh
I should
man.
also mention, right, that you're very instrumental in driving the economic future of New Mexico because you
Oh,
helped justify a minimum wage ordinance increase.
oh,
And
I
were you
did.
also involved in the
Good.
recent healthcare policies too?
Yes, we're doing healthcare stuff. We're doing we have
Universal healthcare, right?
universal childcare in New Mexico.
Yeah. So, I mean,
We're the
like,
first state to make universal childcare that's irrelevant of income, actually, which is a good question. But as we found out, fiscally, it may not be something we can support. But we're running a $3.5 billion surplus.
I mean,
Um,
hey, if people want to vote with their feet and move from California to the abundance of Albuquerque, then, there we go.
so much abundance. We have abundance of whatever you want. Sunshine, crime. We have all of the things you possibly want in here. Sunshine and crime. Mainly sunshine and crime.
All right,
But it's
cool.
great.
I'm going to
So
let you
come
go.
on. This is
Let's do
great.
this.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I know. I appreciate these. I appreciate the commentary. Aaron, it's great to see you as well. I know this is what as Melanie points out. I was going to joke today that this is our 177th year in 2026 doing Albert's List. You can see Albert's List through the ages. It's been remarkably consistent in graphic design for reasons I can't explain fully, but it's been very
We'll
good.
find Colin at the wharf in 1849, huh?
That's right. That's where he is. Find him.
Yep.
We couldn't
Looking
find
for
you, Colin.
jobs at the wharf.
Where were you in the wharf? You were just there. It
He's
was.
he's one of those longshoremen at the wharf. That's what he
Oh,
is.
I thought he was sitting on a barrel. Is it,
He's a striking longshoreman. He was the original Union man. So,
the original Union Man must be AI. His children. So anyway, one of those things. The original, the first Union Man, Colin Mo. This is great. I love the stories. And now he's the AI Union Man, and that is a great character arc. So anyways, let's talk about the December 2025 jobs report. So you've heard of it, and so there's a few things to note. We can go back to October when they released data, and we know that they had paused the October data. There's a lot more to this that we're going to get into a little bit. But so far, December, we only added about 50,000 jobs. That's incredibly disappointing any way you cut this particular bunch of cheese. And more importantly, if you look in here, there's been further downward revisions. So we've secretly, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, not so secretly, but they released the October numbers and they weren't good. Why they didn't come out at that time, of course, because of the closure of they use the government shutdown as an excuse. But at that time, it came across as we were 105,000 jobs under in October. Since then, we have a new revision where we're revised downward an extra 68,000, putting it at about negative 173,000 in October. So last few months have not been great. So if you're feeling it and saying this job market sucks, you're absolutely valid. Yeah, I want to validate you, like parking in a moderately high-end mall somewhere. But leisure and hospitality led the charge. About 47,000 more jobs here in healthcare, of course. Healthcare, another good question that we had from the audience earlier was what about the nationalization of healthcare? Can we do it? Would it be expensive? Very tricky question. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Aaron was kind enough to provide me a series of very interesting links over the last couple of days, and you'll see some of those in here for some additional facts. Thank you, Aaron. And then we've also got some moderately okay state and local government finance activities, 7,000, 11,000. That's Aaron's job. Double Aaron. A minus Aaron. That's how I pronounce it. A minus Aaron. Uh, Seven sectors are losing jobs. Information is flat. Utilities is disappointing, but utilities are always disappointing, especially if you've opened your bill in the last 5 years. Retail services are down about 25,000. Construction, we've lost jobs. I was hoping for more retail, especially in the month of retail sales in December, but we saw some of that fall back. Some of that could be less holiday help than we typically get. These are often seasonally. One way to look at adjusted numbers in this way is to think about how it reflects on a seasonal basis. Mining and logging, transportation, warehousing, all negative. So Vanita asks a great question. Are the healthcare jobs all clinical? No. In many cases, we're looking at just the expansion overall of the healthcare industry. Some of that is clinical, but most of it is billing and lower paid work. So it's not we're hiring doctors or nurses. We're hiring a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the related auxiliary services, the insurance, all the stuff that makes things work. We're getting older as a society. Healthcare is expensive. There's all these things we have to talk about to engage this. We don't have an answer for how to talk about it, despite the fact that it's about 17% of our GDP each year gets spent on healthcare, and it is rising, rising. And Albert points out the last baby boomer turns 65 next year. That's hilarious. I cannot wait. I hope there's a medal that provides them that. That's good. Healthcare needs AI and business leaders. Absolutely. Colin, my hot take is that almost none of the layoffs are because AI is able to replace these workers, but that this will be true in 2028. If you expect at least 10 more years in your career, I highly recommend learning how to AI. Very good take, Colin. That's a great take on this too. That's a good thing as well. Are we seeing job losses due to AI? Are companies replacing it to AI? It is, to Colin's point, we're still early on that curve. Despite it being something that's ubiquitous, it's likely not something that's driving a huge amount of this. As pointed out, Michael, thanks for sending this. AI is not the big driver of layoffs right now. There's a lot of other issues, and Vinita's absolutely right too. Companies are looking out, trying to figure out how to use AI to see returns. Labor force participation is also down versus a year ago. These don't change a lot month to month. That's the percentage of workers who could be working that are working. There's a reason it has been declining just by natural demographics. As we age out and people retire, there are fewer people in the workforce proportion to the total amount of people that we have in our society. And as we are getting older as a society, our labor force participation has gone down since 2000. But it also indicates situations where sometimes people drop out of the labor force, especially if they're unable to find a job or for a long time they become discouraged to a point where they're no longer seeking work, which means they fall out of this value. Melanie says, this is interesting too. Are healthcare jobs resistant to offshoring? My goodness, everything is potentially, it depends on the things. So the back infrastructure of healthcare jobs this is a bigger discussion. That's a great question. So the back infrastructure is something that can easily be distributed offshore. In Excuse me, I'm coming off of a cold that I brought back, an exotic illness from my adventures in the Middle East over the holidays. But right now, I've got there's an essence. When we think about questions of healthcare, we have a lot of barriers in place that prevent things like free movement of labor. It's very hard, for instance, to move a doctor who's readily licensed in another country into the United States. And one of the reasons we have difficulties obtaining, or looking at shortages in physicians, among other things, is we do have caps in place that prevent this from happening. There are artificial caps. There's not enough people that are admitted to medical schools that are qualified, and then as a consequence, this creates a physician shortage in the system, among other things. And so right now, it's hard for the in-person stuff to be offshored, but we're looking at it really the tip of the iceberg on some technological advancement in this sector. And I think this is actually we're going to see a lot of changes, especially in the next 20 years, as people look at what is fundamentally a very difficult economic model to support, and then finding things like from the AI versions and of healthcare, the robotic versions of healthcare, the offshoring of healthcare effectively beyond. I can reach a qualified physician who might speak my language in another country through through an intermediary service. Vikram says, shouldn't Medicaid cuts lead to reduction in healthcare workforce? That's a very interesting point. So the healthcare workforce is such a giant beast that you'd think that the question is, will Medicaid itself be sufficient, cuts in Medicaid be sufficient to reduce the system? People are likely still going to find healthcare in other places. And Medicaid operates as a really big negotiator for a lot of these individual healthcare products and services. And so they come out and Medicaid as a big provider, of healthcare, they have a lot of power when it comes to negotiating prices and deals. Now, if you remove Medicaid from that equation, private companies fill that niche, and there's a lot more noise. There's a lot more variation in the type of contractual deals and abilities that they can provide the people that are reliant on Medicaid as something. And so I think it's not going to be a 1-1 scenario. It's not like it's the only provider and then that's it. It'll be the slack is taken up by the private sector, most likely, Vikram, in these scenarios. And so we look at these things, and employment changed by industry since February 2020. So if we look across the board, where have we seen the growth? We've seen almost 2 million jobs in healthcare. We've seen 1 million in professional and business services, 1 million in social assistance. Look at information, driving economies of the Bay Area, etc. We've got 4,000. That's it, just 4,000 jobs since February 2020 added across the economy. Notably, not something to write home about. And then on the right, we've got the number of workers at each level of unemployment duration by month. And you see evidence to show, and if you're feeling this, and especially if you've been laid off recently, you're like, my goodness, I can't find jobs. There's nobody hiring. It's true in many cases. And it's a very gradual uptick that we've seen in the time that people are unemployed. And so, although it's not drastic, it's not an overnight thing where a recession came upon us and suddenly it went from 6 million to 60 50 million unemployed. Going from 6 million to 7.5 million is significant. And especially when you look at people that are unemployed for more than 27 weeks, that number has increased quite substantially. Those long-term unemployed people, often in environments like tech. Albert says, but if you did February 2020 to April 2022 and April 2022 to now, you'd see two different stories. You'd see that run up, as you point out, after COVID, and then of course you'd see a very different story after April. So Peter asked, where do biotech companies fall in healthcare? Great question, incidentally. The way that the Bureau of Labor Statistics designates industry is actually a very interesting question, and they do it by whatever NIACS or equivalent code or industry code that they use to define industries. And so biotech, of course, you're dealing with some stuff which could be arguably professional and business services, which often includes some scientific services. And then you have things like information. And then you have a combination of those things. So my guess is a lot of scientific, for the purposes of other aspects, are included in other parts of this, notably professional and business services. Some might be included in healthcare. And so it depends, and it could also be included in technology and information. It is very tough. And some companies who straddle the boundaries between many different industries are often poorly reported in this sector. And so this is a downfall with this data, is its lack of resolution on stuff like this, Peter. And that's a great question. And so I'd have to go into a deep dive onto the biotech sector separately to provide some data. So this is an interesting thing. The BLS, just looking at this, since April, we have not added a ton of jobs. And exactly, if we went back in time now, so put on your magic hats over the last 6 months, and we've gone back, traveling back in time through disappointment. So December up 50,000 jobs, November up 56,000. October we went down 173, and it was off the radar because it was paused that month. I don't want to show this data, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Up 108,000 in September and minus 26,000 in August. So those of you keen to rock and roll with your head math, it's almost a wash, although a slightly positive one. Very disappointing. And unemployment is about 4.4%, up from 4% in January. Not significant and below kind of our long-term average, but it is still substantial. These are real people and real jobs. This is a worsening economy and a worsening job market. So Aaron's also saying low growth in 2025, less than 600 for the year, add millions retired, millions deported, 4.5% unemployed. So Aaron's point too, let's talk about immigration for a second on this too, to Aaron's point in this. Huge shift in labor use, agreed. But the immigration side is a big deal when it comes to kind of calibrating how good these job numbers are. What does it mean when you're a nation of 340 million people and you're adding 50,000 jobs? Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? What is a good number? What's not a good number? So when we had higher than expected immigration, like we did a couple years ago, a good jobs number is 200K plus. That's pretty good, 250K. When immigration drops, it's less than that. It's probably in the hundreds. I'd say 150, 200. That's probably okay from a steady state scenario. And then when it's lower than that number, that means that population is growing, but jobs are not growing to meet that population growth that we're seeing. And that's the disturbing part when it's numbers that are below 100,000 like we've seen in a given month. It's not negative, but it's also not strong. And it indicates some hesitancy on behalf of companies and all who are operating in this space. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll look at the revisions between estimates. You know, it's interesting between presidencies. You know, there was obviously President Biden got a lot of slack for the job revisions, negative job revisions that were happening. Same thing's happening in President Trump's environment, which actually leads me to believe the numbers are more trustworthy than I had worried they might be. But if you look at the revisions, so the seasonally adjusted change, so the first time we released the job market numbers is in this column over here that says first. Might be tough to read in the cheap seats, but in December we added 50. November was originally 64. October wasn't reported, and then September 119, and then the second number was what the second revision showed, and the third number is the most accurate when all that information is out there, and that's kind of the most recent revision that we have. And so if we look at the month-to-month change between the third and the first, we'll notice that these are significant downward revisions. Collectively in December, about 192,000 jobs we thought we had, but oh, by the way, we actually didn't. And that's not insignificant. And down across the board, if we go all the way back June, May, April, March, February, the jobs have not been there. And indeed, the negative revisions are such that those numbers that we thought we were kicking around 200, 150, we actually lost jobs in June, as it turns out. We actually only brought in 120 in March when we thought we were rocking and rolling with 228. And so it's been weaker than we've thought we've been. And so the initial data has been, oh, strong, strong. And we've been going back and we've been downgrading this month after month. And so bad news bears. Another way to look at this number, US job growth has decelerated significantly in the last 2 years. And if we follow that 3 month moving average, we've finally hit it, ladies and gentlemen. We've crossed about that zero boundary on the 3 month moving average for jobs. We knew it would be one time soon. What a way to kick off 2026. So great. What a magnificent time to be alive. So, when we think about full employment, on the other hand, if we look at the ratio of the number of people who are aged 25 to 54 who are employed, the good news is we've been holding kind of where we are, but it's still a little hypothetically below where we might expect this to be. And so we should expect a number maybe closer to around 82%. We've been right below 81% in this number. So there's still people that we're missing in this market that should be there that otherwise aren't. And then if we think about the year-on-year job growth, and this is another Joe Politano chart, who big fan of following him, very data-driven and a lot of interesting results. You can follow him on his econ blog. And this is some good stuff. So job growth decelerated, but employment shrinking in several industries specifically. So if we go year on year, we're obviously still up. Purple is health, right? So that's year on year growth in health. Her health is still good. It's still good. The size of that bar is still positive. We're still above that area, as is leisure and hospitality. But if you go to all these other industries down here, all of these other ones, all the way down the list from the government, of course, down to professional and business services, goods producing industries, trade, transportation, are all trending negative over the last year. And overall, this is the picture of the job market. This growth has dried up and it's still drying up. And it's been on a downward trajectory since 2023. Now let's go into tech for a little bit. Since we know your friends are in tech, your best friends in tech, you were in tech. We talk about tech all the time. It's the Bay Area. You've got to rock and roll and you've got to know what you're working on. So overall for tech, obviously apart from the sunshine, rainbows, unicorn phase in 2022 where hiring was happening and we were doing stuff, 23, 24, 25, 26 has been disappointing. We saw that bounce back early in 25. We said maybe we turn the corner on tech and it's still been disappointing since then. Although we're still cracking a little bit above zero year on year for software publishers. We're still particularly down in computer system design services. So if you're in that sector, it has been a rough patch for you. And overall, though, the big thing is notice the magnitude of these numbers is so small. So you're shrinking your size, but you're also not hiring. It's like hiring stopped. And if we look at this as well, we go to small business employment watch. From from what I like, from what seems like, I feel like it's like a 90s techno band, Paychecks. They have this thing here where they kind of run and roll the historical job index. And for small businesses, obviously hit hard by COVID. Since our little bounce back, it's been a dry run. But right now, our level of employment and job index for small businesses is lower. We actually have to go back before COVID to the 2008 financial crisis to see numbers at this level. And so I'm going to introduce some. There's a few questions here that people have asked, which I thought were interesting. So I'm going to interject them to kind of go beyond our normal day-to-day shenanigans when it comes to the jobs report. So I had somebody asked me, what about toys, Reilly? What have toys been doing? I love questions that are highly specific and completely from left field. Tell me about toy industry. I love that half of you may be elves, and I appreciate that. Tell me about toy sales. So for the person who said toy sales, I went to the largest toy representative industry group and got some of their data. And it's actually very interesting. I was on a rabbit hole on websites I had never before visited. And this is a good question, of course, as Albert points out. Were families only getting one or two toys this year per the president? As it turns in aggregate sales levels in 2025, and mind you, the Christmas data is not out yet, but we're talking through September 2025, we're up about 4%. And about 2% moving more toys, 2% more units, and 7% more dollars of that, which is very fun. National Retail Foundation's big show's coming next week, Albert. Albert's right about this. Stay tuned. That's going to be an interesting drop. Melanie says, like the child labor lawn tools. That's right. Lawn tools to do child labor made by children. It's like an inception level of discourse. Terrific toys. But Brian, that's pretty good. I appreciate a good dad joke in here. Rabbit holes you didn't tell me about. Come on, Aaron. This is good. I feel you're dissing me. This is a rabbit hole, Aaron, that you couldn't have possibly. Aaron anticipated every question I would have asked and sent me a series of links. This one also was not anticipated by me. But on those toys, so toy consumption has been high, despite the fact, of course, we import a lot of toys. They're also, as noted, exposed to a lot of different tariffs and levels. And the biggest super categories of things, I have an 11-year-old son. He plays. I mean, toys are a difficult question for him. He's more of a Roblox type kid, but he's got some other stuff that he's engaged with, and we do some other things. But I remember a few years back, you're into some things, but you're still into. You've got these building sets, the Super Mario Brothers Game Boy. You've got X-Men '97 figure 6-inch, blah blah blah. You've got Pets Alive, Polly, the surprise magic bird, which is a lot of description as well as an embedded backstory, which I think is very fascinating from my perspective. What is it? Pets Alive, Polly, the surprise magic bird. That's a lot to unpack. So if you have children with that, I would love an explanation. Email me. One of those things would be it's like I'm just adding words together. Like I feel like I'm 125 years old and I've just discovered the internet when I read what is this? The Afmau Me Meows Elemental Classic Mystery Plush, 11 inches. I have no idea what they're describing, and nor do I want to embed myself deeper into what those toys are. But that's what's hot in the toy market today. Thank you, random audience member, for this in-depth adventure that you sent me on. Now, on the other question, we had questions about insurance costs. We also were like, tell me about toys. Same person, but also insurance premiums. And I like I see somebody's looking to burn down a toy factory. So we've got a few things here about insurance costs that are noted. So first of all, the big one, health insurance. You get every year. You might be an employer. You might work for your employer. Everything gets disappointing. The cost of health insurance continues to rise. Notably, though, if you'll notice from this chart, relatively in a consistent stepwise, almost stable pattern over the last 5 years. Same time period, let's look at the bottom, which is property and casualty insurance. And you'll notice from 23, 24, 25, massive increases in this. And although it's kind of leveled off as to kind of its 2022 growth right now, we're dealing with we're cruising at a level that's 25% higher than where we were just a few years back. So what does this mean for the economy, and are people feeling that with insurance premiums? And one concept when it comes down to this is when we pay for insurance, especially stuff that we have rising building costs, rising replacement costs, everything across the board that goes into the calculation of risk. So risk, of course, the story of insurance is fascinating, by the way. So if you go back into history, and I always kick off my finance lectures with the history of finance when I'm teaching a grad course in finance, because it's fascinating stuff. And so it used to begin by waging on the life and death of political figures. That's how insurance began. That's when people first began to ask and say, well, how long do people live typically? How long do we have these particular, when we think about actuarial tables, the likelihood of you dying in a given year? And all of that stuff grew out of the math that became in the 16th and 17th centuries around these wages. Then you have some very, very severe events, one of which the Great Fire of London in the 1660s. And that took out much of London. And it was actually a insurance representative. If you're a fan of British history, you may know of Barebones Parliament. And Barebones, it looks like Barbones, his brother, who was the famous bare bones of the Parliament, went out to found the first insurance company and fire insurance company of London that actually used data to figure out the likelihood that something would burn down depending on what the business was made of. So by the 1680s, you had this, and then you had Lloyd's of London begin as people began taking wages on whether or not a ship would come back. In a maritime coffee house known as Lloyd's of London, that eventually became, of course, the large insurance provider in London. And so by the late 1700s, 1800s, we had enough of the math and data together to produce what is effectively the basis of the modern insurance industry. But if you know a little bit about actuaries, it's all about the calculation of risk. So when those input variables to what makes risk risky are the odds of that negative thing happening higher, are the costs of rebuilding that thing or providing a replacement thing higher. All that adds to a perfect scenario where insurance costs rise. It does have a drag effect on the economy, and it's part of the cost of doing business. And it is true, it is likely one of many factors right now, including uncertainty about the tariffs, among other things, that are causing companies to pause when they look at questions like what can I afford? How can I expand? What am I going to be doing 1 or 2 years down the line? And what kind of workforce can I maintain? So this is really good. Michael says, and now we're back to that, except people are betting crypto or going on regular prediction markets, which are just fun and games. Vanita, I've missed your insurance questions. Health insurance payers and provider incentives are not economically aligned. This is a good point. This creates care that is not managed, so the total cost of care increases, and then it shows up as premiums. This is very, very interesting. Traditional healthcare is sick care. We need alignment to proactive care, people taking care of their health now, and have funds incentives to do this so they stay healthier and hence lower costs down the life and better lifespan. Vinita, well spoken. Vinita, of course, is a health expert, and I'm grateful always, Vinita, for you for your input here. And this is excellent. So, leading into that, on another question, and people were like, "What about let's nationalize healthcare?" Okay, so like we're just people ask. I hope I love the random questions, and I love them because they're great. This is always a question that comes up, and as Benita will also, I hope, opine a little bit on this. It's a complex question. Back in the 1970s, the United States considered the question of nationalizing healthcare, and although it was ultimately voted down, the environment of the 1970s was very different than it was today. We have an economic system and an economic model for healthcare that has drastically departed from where we were even 50 years ago in terms of how it makes money, how it maintains money. And so when we look at questions about nationalization, we have to look at questions that are fundamental to how our system works, right? So right now we have a really limited supply of physicians who are highly compensated for their labor to the tune of, let's say, 400, 500K plus per year. Those are not salaries you get when you have true nationalized systems anywhere in the country. And so physicians in general are paid less in those areas. And as a consequence, the whole healthcare model, from the cost of drugs, the nature of those experiments, we've departed so much into a free market system from this, relatively speaking, although we argue what freedom there is within that. It's very difficult to go from that model that we have now overnight into a nationalized model. And some of those reasons are as I think described by Vanita here as well, based on how the business works right now. The provider and economic incentives just are not aligned. And this would involve, so to zero on this. And there is a cool tool here, by the way. A few years back, and it's a little bit outdated. It's like 8 years old-ish. The Center for Infectious Disease Modeling and Analysis at the Yale School of Public Health has this fun little single-payer healthcare financing tool, and you can pick different things, play around with it, and arrive at hopefully a balanced budget for this. But even then, our model has departed from this, and this is why this has become a really complex question. So how do we go from the healthcare system we have now? If your policy goal is this, how do you do this? And there's a whole bunch of variables at play. Not least, you have to expand supply of physicians. You have to change the way that they're brought about, the expectations, the cost structure of the educational system that provides them. And Melanie notes the cost of malpractice insurance settlements must be absorbed by somebody. Oh my goodness. Source: Dr. Melanie's dad. Also, is he? I hope his name is also Dr. Melanie. I hope I'm named Melanie. Melanie is my name, and that's what I do. This is true, and currently doctors, if in private practice, interestingly enough, to this relative thing a few years back, New Mexico passed a terrible law about malpractice, and physicians left in droves. We lost about 30% of our physicians. We fixed the law during the next legislative session, but it was too late. And we ended up losing a lot. Malpractice insurance in New Mexico is very, very expensive. And so it makes it very hard to keep physicians and keep healthcare going. And so we have one town doctor here, and that's why I have my cough. I have latent, untreated tuberculosis, and that's why we're just here. But anyway, I hope not. I really hope not. So it's a big question and a big economic issue. And yeah, Aaron, healthcare is a $7 trillion economy right now. And that's true. That is the number, or very close to that number right now. And so it's beyond our capacity right now to like stamp it and say the government's going to take care of it. We have to rethink the whole business entirely. And that is so hard to do right now. It is unfathomable. There's another policy question. I'm sure if we all got and we had a little roundtable session, rock and rolled with this, we can rock and roll and we can figure something out. But the way the business model has grown away from where it was 50 or 60 years ago when other countries instituted and there are benefits and drawbacks to these systems, but I think most would argue the benefits of the system are that cost coverage and that population coverage and those positive economic effects that come with just greater survival rates. There's Yale did an analysis of this and they estimated what its benefits are. It's very hard to translate that into policy. And so keep thinking about it though. It's not to be distracted from nor accepting that it's just harder than just waving a wand overnight. We have to think very carefully about this in different ways to make that work. But I think it's a worthy policy goal, but one that requires a lot of very different things to engage us in that level. Now, economic warning signals. So this is I'm not a doomsayer, Riley, and there's always a graph for something. So I can show you one that'll show it's going to go up. I can show you one that'll show it's going to go down. And so, you look at a few of these hobos on the interwebs. This is from Gregorian Charts, of course, one of the sanctuary economists. But one of the things that they have here, they talk about different aspects that resemble other things. There's a whole sub-industry in economics where we take a chart, put it over another chart in a previous time period, and say, oh, it's the same. And it's not really that way all the time. Every story is slightly different, even if the history doesn't repeat itself, it echoes, yada, yada, yada. But in the cyclical share of GDP, the early warning section, looking at things like investments, durable good consumption, equipment investment, that's been going down a bit. Not catastrophic, but it's been going down a bit. Chart two, residual residential investment has not been stellar, incidentally, for a lot of different reasons. And the dashed orange line shows that, hey, we've been kind of logging back and forth. That's not good news. Cyclical unemployment in things like construction and manufacturing. Noted manufacturing decline. Construction numbers aren't hot right now. And the business equipment investment, the laggard, is still holding. A lot of businesses are still holding up in a lot of their investments, but they find that typically these turn latest in this market. And so what the premise of Gregorian charts here is they're trying to say, wait a second, we're somewhere between the downturn of the focal point equivalency of 2005, but before 2008, meaning that there's still a downward cycle that we have to talk about. And so something to think about, but not something to worry about. Now, this came out in Financial Times. You may have seen this, and this goes back into my side knock. What do you want to do when we always ask the same question? We're at Albert's list. We're looking for jobs. We're finding jobs. We're being competitive on the market for jobs. When it comes to wages and employment, are social skills important or antisocial skills? And as it turns out, they are. And don't despair because you can learn them. Because I don't have the world's most stellar social background, and I'd rather, live in a cabin in the woods, but I was not I was not willed one. And so Albert says, go out on Friday night, don't stay in. So if you look at the question of social skills in math, for instance, right? And those are, as you know, as a former, officer of the math team, a mathlete, if you will, I'm a big fan of maths in general. If you have high social math rate, I know it's like this. Give me some Gaussian distributions. If you have high social and high math skills, you do better than people with high social skills and low maths But high social skill and low maths do better than low social skills and high math. And then if you have low social and low math, tough schnoogies, there's other things. You'll be great at whatever you do. You're doing great. You're doing great. But on the other side, on the right side, high social and high maths do really well when it comes down to not only the employment levels but the wages people get. High social and low maths do really well, and the people whose wages tend to stagnate have lower social skills. And here's the thing: do not despair. You're looking at this saying, "Ah, pshaw, I just want to be recognized for the excellence that I have in a particular a technical area," and you should feel excellent for that technical skill, as that is excellent. But also, if you really want to add a little razzmatazz to your job interviews, show that you've got some personality, rock and roll, do high social stuff, spend some time building it. And that's the source of hope, right? There's only so much math my four neurons in my brain can possibly absorb, but there's always ways that I can learn social skills. And that's for right across the board. And I want to encourage people down that line to look at it as a potential differentiator in the job market when you go to your next math rave, which is also a fun place. Is that also, where's that? Where's that being held? Is that in Atherton? So question A. Now let's talk a little bit about current events. Let's ask a series of economists how they feel about this question. Giving the president more direct influence over monetary policy would lead to substantially worse monetary policy decisions. What do we say, economists? What do we say? So, as it turns out, they've surveyed economists this year, and about 94% strongly agree to this situation. And as it turns out, half the people who said no because they picked the wrong button. And this is the fun part. This is really cool. That's true. And on the right side, if we weigh it by the confidence you have in that answer, you can see that we're still cruising up in the 90s for this way. Now, why is it that we don't want presidents necessarily to have direct influence over monetary policy? Why do we have an independent Federal Reserve? Why is the Federal Reserve charged with all of this responsibility? They keep unemployment. They keep us at close to maximum employment. They keep inflation near 2%. That's called a dual mandate. So we go back in time and let's go to our dear friends in Turkey. And if we look at the inflation in Turkey that happened in the last decade or so, what happens when a populist strongman with a idiosyncratic preference for low interest rates undermines the central bank and appoints loyalists? We've actually seen this before, and we actually seen this with Erdogan, the leader of Turkey. And so starting in 2018, he signaled that, hey, monetary policy should be under my control. And then, 2021, after COVID, I would point out, slightly, we're on the up and up now again. He installed a loyalist as a central bank governor. And then you got the worst just series of hyperinflationary decisions that they've made, which is terrible for the economy. It is so hard to grapple with questions like this. And so we've seen this before, and we've seen it recently. So when it looks like this, and you've seen the statement from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, like whatever, presidents make good decisions, they make bad decisions, they can be political, apolitical. I don't care. As somebody in economics, I get to be in a middle space. I can be like, I'm interested in mercantilism, and I can be pretend neutral for most things. But this is alarming to me, the sort of shenanigans that are happening with this, because Jerome Powell, like him or hate him, has negotiated a very, very threading the needle, an impossible task with the economy and trying to limit the downward effects of inflation while maintaining employment and economic growth. And this is very, very interesting. Colin says, I mean, I wouldn't trust the president to be around children. Why would I trust him with monetary policy? Excuse me. Very funny. Aaron says, so we do not have a crash of 1929. Albert says, so buy gold, silver, homes, hard assets. I missed the boat on gold and silver. Ugh, hard assets. You're right. What's your inflation hedge? Is it gold? Is it silver? Is it platinum? Is it electrum because you're a 6th century BC Lydian? If you get the reference, you're getting A plus. Michael, hey, I got the Fed to release a statement on a Sunday. How many presidents can do that, right? Now it's true. Nothing to freak somebody out more than threatening to sue them. because you don't like them for various reasons. But keep an eye on this because this development is a little bit onerous, but it's also a risky maneuver from the president. And it's a tricky thing to do. And you can't just pull off somebody who's going to generate low interest rates for you. And my hope is that even if it's just an individual, I don't like Jerome Powell kind of thing, that whoever is in that role is competent and can weigh economic policy competently, because our lives depend on that. Now, a couple of other notes here. This is one of the first of a series of things I call the Aaron links. Like him or not, the president is like your sarcastic logo. Right, Brian? He can be very amusing at times. I don't want him over my house all the time, and I don't want to give him custody of my child. But it is a thing. Albert says, I'm wondering if dissent, etc., are automatic shoo-ins for the Senate too. So far, they have shown they'll go with him, but maybe there's a limit. This is a great question. Are we at the limit? What is the limit to this? Right? Power is something that is held by an individual, but often conceded by others around him. Right. So when you engage this sort of thing from a meaningful relationship, you have to ask at what level will we tolerate these things? And this is the question that the incentives of what makes politicians politicians against the against their charge of office, which is to represent the what is in the best interests of the people, even if the people themselves don't understand or always understand exactly what's being voted on. It's a very tricky thing. Colin says, I can't help but feel all this hullabaloo about quantitative easing and monetary policy is smoke and mirror. A massive gap in resource distribution. If everybody had a billion added to their accounts today, but resources didn't change, nothing changes. That's a phenomenally profound statement, Colin. That's very interesting. Yeah, that is like that's a presentation wrapped within a presentation. Very good points. I love this good stuff, guys. This is from a link Aaron actually hooked me up with from the Washington Post. And this is interesting. So let me ask you this question on a slightly different note. Uh, Going back to economic history, we can see how certain jobs have been replaced by technology over time. So factories replaced cobblers before factory jobs went overseas. Like right now, you're probably not a blacksmith, a tailor, a miller, a cabinet maker, a boatman or boatwoman, or a canalman. If you're, just imagine you're on like you're in the San Joaquin River or something, and you're just like, yes, I'm the last one. And you're a metal molder, you're a meat cutter. All these jobs have kind of gone away. I mean, if you're a millwright, surprising increase in millwrights through about 1910 before they dropped. If you are a millwright or a graduate, I feel like Berkeley has a millwright program. But you can see how over time these jobs change. But even if we go to the right-hand side and we ask the question, the occupational category in each state, what do people say? So historically, from 1850 through the early 1900s, it was farming for most of the country. And look how that changed in the last 80 years, just the last 80 years. You've seen an explosion of first industrial, clerical. You have operations in blue, factory workers, craftspeople, and then that became clerical, including retail. So you had the explosion of the cashier era, 1980s, 90s, 2000s. And then look what happened between even 2011 and 2023. We have this explosion of professional jobs, managers, owners, things like this completely changed in that case. So this is interesting. So Dr. White, Albert says, I'm not sure if you mentioned this as I stepped away, but part of the motivation to get you stepped away. Anyway, part of the motivation to get rates way lower is because of our interest payments on the debt. Our interest payments are about to overshadow our debt, which is wild. You're absolutely right. So can we artificially? So this is not bad. This is a good point about this. Let's reflect on that for a second. It is good for us to have low interest rates in the service and production of our debt. It is much better for us fiscally to get our debt a little bit under control to help manage our long-term interest rates. But here's the other rub though. If you're tolerating low interest rates and high inflation at the same time, inflation can be, and this is a debate among economists how this might work in practice. If you can maintain inflation a little bit higher than where we're used to, say 4, 5, 6%, you can help erode some of these negative debt effects that you can have. And so it's possible. So it is arguably a position to take, and one that we can fight about a bit, but it's a logical position to take that you can tolerate higher inflation and lower rates, if only uniformly to help reduce this giant debt load. And indeed, at some point, we probably have to grapple ahead with that. But then fundamentally, we go back to the question of economic growth. And the most surefire way to control debt is to grow faster than our debt grows economically, right? So if we can grow our economy bigger and get a bigger slice of the pie, that will decrease proportionately that size of that debt to our economy. And that has better long-term ramifications. And one question is, if we're doing a suboptimal economic policy where we're keeping rates artificially low, tolerating high amounts of inflation, and that inflation stagnates growth, we might not end up in a position that might otherwise be constructive towards achieving that said end. And Michael says it's a tough choice for me right now because being out of work almost 3 years, Michael. Oh my goodness. And Albert says, I'm curious to know, if you really want to be a cabinet maker, miller, blacksmith, where do you go to get educated in that? None of these jobs ever appear on Albert's list. Well, the Berkeley Institute for Cabinet Making, one of the most prestigious Bay Area cabinetry interest institutes. It is tough. It is tough to find. It's tough to find an apprentice. A lot of those jobs just simply don't exist. Basically, the UK in the 2010s before Brexit. As Aaron says. Interesting stuff. Now, this is an eye test. So I know you guys can't read this particularly well, and I don't know what I was thinking in pasting this, but another great Aaron link for you. But it's my fault for he didn't wield this poor graphic design upon you. That's entirely me. So on the left-hand side, these are the so the Washington Post did this other series, which is really fun, where they looked at the highest performing jobs, the top jobs, the fastest growing jobs, and the slowest growing jobs for different demographic groups. And so on the left-hand side, these two charts are women. On the left is women with bachelor's degrees. On the second chart from the left, it's women with advanced degrees. And then on the right-hand side, you have men with bachelor's degrees and men with advanced degrees. So if you're a woman with a bachelor's degree, places where you've seen the lowest growth have been in the service sector in the last few years. Retail supervisors, social customer care reps. Where you've seen the most growth has been things in like nursing, as well as things like accounting, which has been growing faster. If you are a woman with an advanced degree, where you've seen the decline, you see them leaving in droves, teaching elementary and middle school in particular. If you want an advanced degree and very little appreciation, teaching is a great spot for it, even though you have a huge positive effect. And then where you've seen the growth has been a series of nuanced professional-based things, ranging from writers and authors, market research, marketing and sales managers, app and software developers. And so it's been an interesting thing. Excuse me. Oh God, I'm glad. I'm really glad, Scott, you came in here and saved the day with some a very Wisconsin. I love your Wisconsin background as well as some fantastic Wisconsin sorted skill sets for you. And I think what an affordable educational opportunity for you guys. This is great. So cabinet making, make it happen. Albert List Cabinet. And for men with bachelor's degrees, where did we see the fastest growth? We saw it in management analysts in the last 2 years. Where have we seen it fall off? Accounting and auditors. So men are leaving accounting with bachelor's degrees. And with advanced degrees, we've seen drop-offs in lawyers, high school teachers, chief executives, legislators, lawyers again. A lot of lawyers dropping off as a slowest growing job for men. But as if you're an advanced degree, one of the highest growing areas, app and software developers, computer work management analysts. And app and software developers kind of dominated from 1999 to 2025 before it was overtaken in a few other industries. So a little bit outdated, but it is interesting to see how this is shaking up. And I know you guys are like, well, what about my blue collar workers in the audience? What about all of you who are out there in cabinet making right now? Just you're crying a single tear because it seems like we're not mocking cabinet making. Cabinet making is so important. So blue collar employment in the United States has been struggling though, and this is just a chart from 2023 to 2024 into 2025. Since January or February 2025, we've actually lost about 100,000, 150,000 blue collar jobs. And then on the top right, we look at manufacturing employment. A lot of this due, of course, these are negative externalities, and the tariffs are a part of this. They are 100% a part of what's happening with this. We've seen manufacturing employment really struggle across the board. And so transportation equipment, food, computers, electronics, machinery, all that stuff. It's been bad news bears for them. And then year-on-year change in auto worker jobs. And that dates before the current presidential administration. We've seen a kind of a downward trend that began in 2023, and it's continued. And we've seen this right across the board from steering and suspension components to vehicle final assemblies. And then finally at the bottom right, Change in manufacturing jobs in general. Most states showing slight negative decreases. California down almost 3% in manufacturing. Oregon down 5%. Wisconsin down 0.7%. And then, you've got some states that are slightly positive. Alaska's up 4%. New Mexico up 1%. And Rhode Island up 1.8% as well. And this is really, really interesting. So this is good. Let me catch up on the comments here. So Aaron says historic shift for women. It leads to transformation, agency, wealth, independence. The pair bonding rate, marriage, household formation numbers will shift dramatically. Albert says auto workers. I sat in a few Ubers in Dubai back in December. I've also been in an Uber in Dubai before. The cars I rode in were Chinese EVs. American EV makers have a lot of work to do. I hope we can catch up. 100% true. China is dominating the electric vehicle market by just leaps and bounds, and they're going to continue to do so. Our manufacturing technology is just not keeping up. Aaron says, how many openings in the United States for welders? 250,000 openings. And where are the people to possess those jobs? MIG, TIG, whatever you got, rock and roll. And Melanie says, what changed in 2023 for U.S. automakers? What a great question. Does anybody know? This is an interesting question. So when we think about the strength of the U.S. automaking economy, there's been a few things at play. Oh gosh, market deliveries, vehicle shares, da, 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 da. Let me see if I can find some data in this. And this is interesting. So there were some, and I have to look back at this because I saw this and I was like, I didn't have a good answer for that, Melanie. And I have to actually look into that. Um, Global competition is part of this, but that's not sufficient. Let me figure this out. Albert says, New Mexico, the land of manufacturing plenty. Oh, good. You guys you found the East Bay area cabinet makers. Yes, drawer.com. I wonder how much they paid for that. Form and reform. Ask for John. You can use my name for referral. Michael, you're amazing. That's great. Cabinet makers in the Bay Area. It's a good craft. Be good with it. Do well by it. Make sure. That's what we have here at Albert's List. I didn't realize that I've been completely mischaracterizing the Albert's List community. I didn't realize it was entirely cabinet makers. This is great. So thanks, guys. Tech, no tech anymore. Just cabinet making. We'll do different like woods that are good for. We'll do a breakdown in like collective wood prices. Oh, that'd be great for different species. Oh man, so I got to get you a good answer about autos in the United States have been struggling under international competition in particular, but there's been a few other things in general, and even despite this, protectionist tariffs, a lot of what makes up a car are made in other areas, and so in 2025, I see why we've seen this explosion in things like steering and suspension components, because a lot of those things are international in nature. A lot of the supply chains are international. And didn't Stellantis and Ford do a bunch of layoffs that year? Yes. But I'm trying to think of the reasoning why. And it could be just the poor decision making on their part, but it's also other things. Labor shuffling, union stuff, all of that's good. That was all part of it. This is right. This is all part of the story. So other things. Let's wrap up some other questions here. Housing rent, housing growth, older, more affordable units in places that build homes, you saw declines in the prices of those homes. Rents went down in the 11 largest areas that added at least 10% to your housing stock. So when it comes down to housing, please look at building the supply when you can. Now, the president's come out with some interesting policies. Some of them have been very demand-based in their oriented. So we don't need to stimulate demand right now. We need to stimulate supply. We have a lot of demand. We need supply to be built in areas where we need them. And why do we need that to happen? The price of food and shelter, unsurprisingly, have outpaced wage growth in the last 5 years. And so, excuse me. So if we look at this overall, and you can see wage growth being relatively steady since 2021, alcohol and recreation, both interesting sunny spots in our inflationary paradigm. But shelter, food away from home, food at home, and services other than rent have been continuing to increase. As Albert says, drink and recreate. Drink safely and recreate safely. Just don't eat. It's fun. Sounds like a day. So this is a fun question I had. So I had another question from the market that said, tech in the United States, there's problems in tech. Will it go to Europe? And then they point, and I imagine they pointed at kind of a cigar smoking man with a beret who looks disenchanted with life, sitting in a cafe, but with affordable health care, and asking, is this innovation? And I think in this particular case, so yes, is the United States is always, it's always possible to lose our lead in innovation and all these things in our startups, our infrastructure. But I'm not looking to Europe for this, and I'll tell you why. And I don't mean no insults to my European friends. I understand it well. I visit Europe every year. It's exciting to visit. We often talk about innovation. When I sit in a classroom of American students, they all when I ask them a question about innovation, they give me 15 reasons why they can figure out a way to do it. If I sit at a classroom in Europe and I ask them about innovation, they always give me 15 reasons why they can't do it. And I think culturally speaking, there's a lot more that's going on in this. But when we think about, I'm sorry about this, my mouse is being completely wackadoodle with me right now, so I apologize. Bear with me while I might have to take it off the slide here. So are they going to steal infrastructure? And here's some data for this. So unicorns, startups worth $1 billion or more. On the left, United States, 682 companies, 2.4 trillion in valuation, 1.2 trillion Silicon Valley valuation. This is in a point in time, December 2024. Compare that to the EU, the entirety of the EU, you have 112 companies and only 339 billion in valuation. It is just so different there. And we think about tech ecosystem metrics. Government R&D spending is all about 80% of the United States. That's not bad. But the VC funding infrastructure is so much less. It's only about 20% what the equivalent VC funding is in the United States in this space. And so the funding isn't there, the infrastructure isn't there. And despite a lot of other things, I'm not worried right now about Europe being the source of this innovation. And I'm not, again, no insult, of course, to Europe and the things that they're doing. I'd be more worried about some of the more dynamic economies in Asia, even the Pacific Rim in general. I think of stealing some of our thunder. I think China in particular has been very aggressive and and although they have a complex relationship with some of their startup firms, a lot of entrepreneurial entities have been very successful at producing amazingly strong products. And so my concern is mainly international and giving up that innovative edge, particularly to some of the growing economies in Asia. Now, a record share of Americans believe the government's doing a poor job in economic policy. Poor job, about 64%. Now, we're kind of negative about the economy. Is there a source of positivity here? Can we possibly, we've turned a lot of corners here. Are there things we can be proud about? Is this going to produce, are there things that we can actually switch this a bit and kind of switch the narrative a bit so we're a little bit more optimistic about some of the stuff that's coming down the line? And let me kind of address this. So one of the questions that I was asked was, it feels like we're running a 21st century economy on 20th century systems, aging workforce, outdated policy models, and mounting debt. From your perspective, what needs to evolve if we want real long-term resilience? And so for this, we have to cultivate what we do well, which is strength and innovation in every capacity. And so this means we have to figure out a way, everything that's atrophied, everything that's ossified in the American economic landscape, we should see as a challenge to innovate and as a challenge to be better within ourselves. When we have a system in place, we have to ask ourselves, is this system? And we become very cautious around certain things. We've been very hesitant. We're worried about keeping our own jobs, worried about our own heads, worried about these things, right? And that's a nature. That's very human. We're just human beings looking for those things. We need to craft a culture of innovation that extends to everything from the nature of how we build, getting rid of how we think about zoning, getting rid to how we think about how tax systems look, how incentives for businesses look. We have to be bolder and more crafty with the way that we produce these things. I think we do. We have created a system that is often very old, but it doesn't mean that we can't benefit it or come up with creative solutions. And I think we've shown a lot of interest in crafting some of these issues across the board. I've been very impressed by even the California legislature last year, and having produced at least a few things to handle CEQA and other housing concerns is innovative, and indeed some of the more innovative stuff we're seeing from any legislature. And we need to continually push that. And so if you want real long-term resilience, it's creating a culture of reinforcing innovation that extends to every system that we have in place. And that the fear of failure doesn't stop us from doing good things. And also that we often perfect is always the enemy of the good with us, right? There's a system. We always want things to be as perfect as possible, but sometimes taking a risk and making something happen is going to be worthwhile for us anyway. So I wish we did more of that, and I wish we did less self-preservation and more engagement with some of these questions. And I don't know how that's going to end up. That's hard to do. That's cultural, and a lot of that comes down to an ability we have to take risks, and we have a society that doesn't have a lot of those backstops for us if we fail, and so that keeps people doing what they do best, which is what they know. Another question I had is what will tariffs do to world trade in the near term? Tariffs typically reduce trade in the long term. Uncertainty in tariffs creates distortions in markets. It creates distortions in supply chains. Those distortions and uncertainty raise costs, and so when it comes to trade, it makes trade more expensive for us. And it does lead, even though inflation is not crazy pants right now, and the numbers that just came out, cruising at 2.9%, are not terrible, but it could be lower than where it is now. Somebody asked, how will the US dollar be impacted decades from now in the context of Venezuela, too? So the US dollar is interesting. So we were at a historic high point a couple of years ago, a local high point in our value, and there's a lot of downward pressure on the dollar. Value of the dollar depends on how many people want and willingly wish to trade it. Currencies are strange things, right? If you read that book, History of Money, which came out just in the last year, it's a good little read, but it reiterates some of the facts about money that are interesting. Money exists because we want it to. It has value because we say it does. And for the dollar, that means that our a strong form dollar is the U.S. still being a reserve currency worldwide because of very strong tactical and strategic maneuvering. I think right now we're on a pathway where we're giving up that crown of being that global center towards more of a U.S. Central attitude, which strangely, and as I foresee economically, will lead us farther away from a U.S. centric world into one where we have a diversified world economy that prices commodities not just on the dollar but on a series or basket of different currencies. And that situation is going to continue to erode the value of the dollar. So there's a lot of downward pressure on that. And we benefited in the United States from the Bretton Woods Agreement signed in 1944 that established the dollar as the fundamental reserve currency in the world. And it's still the most traded global international currency by far. And if this declines because people are avoiding the United States or avoiding supply chains in the United States or become a pariah, this will put downward pressure on the dollar for us. That has effects on us. Not only, and we think about, well, does it make it cheaper for us to export? Sure, but it also reduces a lot of our soft power, our economic ability, our ability to maintain some of our largesse when it comes to the international sphere. So we talked about toy sales. This is really fun. We talked about nationalization. What'll help jobs grow again? Let's talk about that. So I love this chart again. I'm just showing this again. We showed this before. I just love predicting things like, because people always bring up, if I brought up anything involving will jobs grow again, it comes down to the question of, well, AI, and it's AI one thing or another. And the fun part about this is still my favorite Financial Times chart. You saw this, I showed this last time or the time before, but I had to dig it up again because I love this prediction. It looks like a academic chart I would create for one of my publications, one of my academic publications, because it's so wide in its thing. Well, we've got this thing. It will either create a technological singularity that will, of course, end all scarcity as we know it, or it results in human extinction. Just pick your poison when it comes to this. And so that's my favorite portion about this, and that's good. So Vikram asks, will things not change drastically in the US if the dollar no longer is the sole reserve currency? No, no, the thing is nothing changes overnight if the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. What happens is there is a gradual erosion of our power and our ability. So we have a lot of ability to our power is our economy is in many ways a function of our power. We have right now, where we still have a dominant effect, is in equity markets. We have about half of the global equity valuation is in the U.S. markets. We have the oldest, deepest, not oldest, but the deepest markets, the most attached to rule of law, and so our equity valuations are sky high. Companies like to trade on our markets, and that creates a lot of power for us. Power can be hard power, can be the strength of our military, but it's a lot of soft power, which is economic power. A strong dollar ensures that. And so while it doesn't in any way catastrophically change any more than the decline of the guilder affected the Netherlands prior to the adoption of the euro or anywhere else, it is something that does negatively affect things. And it does negatively, it allows us no longer to operate as a special person, as a special person in the market. We have to operate by global rules. So strangely, in an effort to be individual, we are aligning ourselves more with the inevitability of our own demise, which is a separate issue. So, is there an economic equivalent of the word abyss? This is really interesting. I would say debt deflation spiral, maybe. Uh, Lost decades, give me the willies. Secular stagnation, all that stuff. Liquidity traps, when the economy is so weak that even like near zero rates don't start demand. That's what I think of when I think of abyss. Um, and then what other things do we have? So what we need to grow again. So I think stable and predictable policy would help us grow again. I think housing supply expansion, for some of the reasons that Aaron would point out, would help us. I think productivity investment, infrastructure, diffusion of tech, that kind of stuff, skills pipelines help. I think lower cost volatility, things like energy, insurance, freight. I think that helps. Targeted immigration and workforce participation improvements. God knows we're phobic of those questions, but those would all improve this. We need to restart I would completely redo our visa system and but still encourage immigration of skilled workers from other places to us. That's beneficial for us in the long run, and that's anathema to the current administration. But I think that's important. Now. This is fun. So somebody asked if global economics are tied to an older leader's whims, what happens when other tariffs policies are gone and what changes are permanent? For instance, soybeans. That's a fun one. So the real question when it comes to this particular administration is this going to be something? Is this something that becomes a long-term movement? Is this Hugo Chavez becoming Nicolas Maduro? Is this a succession of people with this particular policy framework or idea? Or is this a shot in the dark? And that's going to decide ultimately whether something is lasting or isn't lasting in the long run. Pendulums always shift within those boundaries. And so there's a lot of questions over the permanence of our current economic state as it pertains on this. And this is interesting. Now, that's a really good question, and I apologize. Michael asked a very interesting question. I'm sorry for not answering this earlier. I just saw this now. I guess it is now. It's just 4 minutes ago. I had just heard that our trade deficit is extremely low. What effect might this have on things? That's a good question. So, what effect would a low trade deficit have on things? So, trade deficits or trade surpluses are looking at how much we import versus how much we export in a given month. And so, if we export more than we import, we have a trade surplus. If we import if we import more than we export, I should say, if we import more than we export, we have a trade deficit. Now, a low trade deficit implies that our imports and exports are more closely together. So, it's also a function of our GDP calculation. So the US typically runs, eyeballing this, 2 to 4% of GDP as a deficit. So it's an interesting question to ask. And the question is does it fundamentally have an effect on things? In a given month, it doesn't have a huge effect on a lot. Over the long run, though, it has some interesting effects. So imagine if we had a substantial trade surplus. And I'm going to point to a few countries that have done this for a long period of time, one of which is Norway. Norway's had a trade surplus because it exports a lot of oil. That means that its currency is in high demand because people want to use Norwegian kroner for different things, and it makes stuff expensive, relatively speaking, in Norway. But their currency, because of their surpluses over time, has been overvalued relative to other currencies via the Big Mac index for a long amount of time. It's an interesting phenomenon. In the other side of it, the United States typically has maintained a very large deficit over time. We've imported a lot. Japan has exported a lot of goods, has maintained a trade surplus over time. That's enabled it to have a lot of leverage on markets in very interesting ways. Despite having a very indebted economy, it's perceived to be low risk because it is a net exporting nation, among other factors as well. It has a strong rule of law, high savings rate, among a bunch of other things. And so, one thing that it does in the short run is it produces like a mechanical boost to GDP. So, because net exports are part of GDP, our GDP calculation, a smaller deficit raises, relatively speaking, our measured GDP, even if nothing else changes. But this is often fundamentally like an accounting driven answer, and it's not really a symbol of what we would call economic strength. Also, a shrinking trade deficit, if we look at, say, fewer imports, uh, higher cost of inputs in consumer goods, because those imports that we're importing cheaply aren't available. This can potentially raise inflation. It can hit consumers directly. It has effects on supply chains. Sustained low deficits can help appreciate a country's currency. So, for instance, if we had a stronger dollar, that would make exports more expensive abroad. That would reduce our competitiveness over time, but it potentially could result in a situation that is often self-fulfilling, where it would then re-widen the deficit in the future in kind of a loop. It also results in slower consumption growth. And so a very low deficit could also be reflective of lower consumer demand, and consumption is about two-thirds of our GDP. So bottom lines is it's a very interesting question that we have here, but it doesn't make a big deal if it's a month long. What happens is when it's months and months and months of this overhead, year after this. So, good question. So a bunch of other things. Vikram asks, do small global wars help the U.S. economy? How about the 2000s with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Are they a net benefit or lost to economic growth? So that's an interesting question. So defense spending can have a very significant impact on economic growth. Wars encourage defense spending, which by default then employ a lot of people related to the defense industry, from contractors to manufacturers of certain parts and goods, manufacturers of missiles and basic stuff like this. So is it a form of this? So it helps in the sense that spending helps any economy, and wars are a form of spending, but it's not an efficient form of spending, is what I'm saying. You're not helping the right industries in the right places, nor are you maximizing long-term viability in certain ways. And so the war methodology is good. I mean, if you're, 6th century BC Assyria and you're just rocking and rolling and trying to conquer nation states and pillaging them for their physical booty, war can be absolutely beneficial to you. But for us, it looks at this, that is a cost benefit analysis, which is challenging to perform. But part of our military industrial complex does benefit, of course, from the expansion of the military benefit industrial complex. But if your goal is economic growth, there are better ways to achieve that. Aaron says, I have a thesis that 80% of what we worry about has no effect. That's fun because US firms, Fortune 5,000, Financial 1,000, Tech 10,000, have a combined public and private valuation of 75 trillion, 10 trillion in cash. So they have much more power than the US government or all the governments in the world combined. True. But we're all tied together, though, in that space. So that's true. So whereas we could look at something like that and say, hey, and Aaron, you're not wrong. I mean, absolutely. Total global market cap. We look at one reason that, in that same way, if we look at total household wealth in the United States, what is that, 140 trillion, give or take? We shouldn't be that worried about debt in general. But yet, at the same time, as we are paying down interest on debt, we're still paying for things. It is a drag on the economy and it's an inefficiency. And so it may not, to your point, I'm not worried about the end of our civilization, but I am worried about us making choices that put us in a more challenging fiscal position in the future. And I'm just, whoops, fiddlesticks. I'm just trying to adjust my screen resolution back to where it was before. One second, because I normally try to do it for visibility, so I got to reduce my screen size. Regarding Venezuela, what is your belief that it wasn't oil per se, but to save the US dollar? China and Russia seem to own the market, and our application of the Monroe Doctrine stopped the advancement of BRICS for a little bit longer. That's an interesting question. So, the oil market itself, if I brought this up quickly, we did a little street finance here, and we looked at oil producing nations. It is. So when President Trump says or he speaks of the United States and Venezuela as an oil bloc now because of the recent geopolitical phenomenon. And if we let me just make a little roundabout look here. Let's see what we got here. And let me do a switcheroo here. Let me share this screen for a second. Let's look at the biggest oil producers in the world, courtesy of Wikipedia, and it is from December 2023, so it's a little outdated. So the United States is the world's largest oil producer. In New Mexico, we're the second biggest, not the world's second, we're the United States' second largest oil producing state. Then after the United States, we have Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, China, Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. And on this particular chart, you'll notice that Venezuela only is pulling about 1 million barrels a day, or BBL a day, or billion, million, I don't know, 8 barrel a day, which is about 1/13th of the United States' production. It does increase aggregate as a block production, but it doesn't move the needle when it comes to like our global power in oil right now. Now he's saying this, of course, because Venezuela's oil production has not thrived under the current government, the current incentives, the nature of the oil that's extracted, the technology, the accessibility. And the hope is, in the president's view, that American technology and resources and companies will be able to exploit this oil to a greater amount. And that could reduce this, but it's not going to be 13 million barrels tomorrow, and it's not going to change the market overnight. Back to your question, Albert. So if it wasn't oil then, but what if it was to save the US dollar? I mean, I view this as in my view, it's part of a broader, it is part of a broader geopolitical play of axes of influence that we have. It's relics of the global order in of the imperial age, but in a space where the United States can no longer be the post Cold War dominant, showing strength where it can access strength. I think it's related to Greenland. I think it's all logically sorted in the same methodologies. I think it's all part of the same method, and I don't think it's going to save the dollar itself because invading or doing things with different countries doesn't inspire international confidence, but strengthen your economy, being a source of innovation, being a source of growth globally, does on the other hand. And that soft power, I think, benefits us more in the long run than the hard power. China's doing most of the green energy push, Colin, and Colin's right. Different grade of oil too than the US. Absolutely, at least. Different grade entirely. Different grade, different type. And Aaron says the real question is how does the Trump administration shift early 20th century imperial mercantilist status syndication system, which attempts to shift firm power to the state? How much oil or natural resources do they have versus the firm requirements, profits? Major risk. I agree. Michael says gold took a huge jump in response to uncertainty resulting by Venezuela. It's true. We are in such a complex political environment right now. Excuse me, such a complex political environment that every month there's so many things that are changing very rapidly. And we're at a period of stasis, right? We look at geopolitical regimes. We could look at the 1991 to the post-Cold War era and the rebuilding phase, say even through the 2008 through COVID as being a certain regime, really, fundamentally. And now, these regimes change very quickly, and suddenly we're now in this space where we're in these different blocks of territory, and we're looking at accessing resources and land and doing things that were unheard of a few years ago in this space, and it's very uncomfortable to change this quickly from our perspective. But I'm not a political scientist, and I defer to the people who are. Yeah, China's building the world's first electro state, a legacy energy state. I think China is doing their building energy capacity at a level that we need to at least attempt, but we're really not doing a stellar job at this. Colin says, is taking Greenland good for our economy? Is it psychologically important to our president? So yes, the conquest of a territory of 56,000 people with mineral reserves like that would be exploited by under American regimes is good, quote unquote, for our economy. Yeah, I mean, I think it is good for our economy, but I think it's bad for a lot of other things. It's bad. So think of it this way. So you're trying to, if you strong arm the Western Hemisphere, so whether we like it or not, where the consequences of losing Greenland at face value, natural resources and rare earths are valuable. But the trade relationships we have with Europe would be irrevocably damaged. The benefits of NATO would be irrevocably damaged. And so my perspective on this is that you're looking at what is physically good for the economy on one level, and then you're surrendering a positive trading relationship with one of the largest global economic blocs, and that has more profound negative consequences for us. So I think it's bad for us in aggregate, although the physical acquisition of it is good, the negative downstream effects outweigh it, I think. And Marcia says, I'm trying to come up with a positive thought for the new year, but joined late, so that may have been covered already. Yeah, we got rid of that early before we hopped on, Marcia. That's great. Aaron says, taking Greenland's insane, breaking NATO, attacking Europe. Agreed, and has negative consequences with it. EU and NATO will probably rather give away Greenland than get into a fight with the US. But again, at what cost to us, though, right? Everything has a price. It's a cost that you acquire this land, but you lose a access to this giant second largest global economy sort of thing that they have, and that access is going to be challenging to do, and you're losing a lot of goodwill, which has benefited us for a very long time. Terrible, terrible news. Hopefully, there are better ways to, it's a different policy perspective on this, but sometimes we can't influence history, but we are nonetheless part of it. So we're gonna see what happens with this. Are we gonna open up the Albert's List Greenland desk sometime soon, Albert?
Yeah,
Live from
I
Greenland.
guess we're fishing jobs. I don't know, oil jobs up there. But I mean, yeah, I mean, speaking of all that, like with all of these uncertainties continuing to mount and all of the various things that we've experienced in the past year, right, I guess we're becoming cabinet makers, but like what what is your forecast for the year ahead? And more importantly, like I think the big question is what is your sort of like maybe 10,000 foot view for job seekers and
Yeah.
how they should feel about the year ahead?
So we have a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of uncertainty means I'm not seeing anything policy-wise to suggest that the job market is going to turn a corner at some point in the next couple months. That 3 month trend is still means it's going to be difficult. Now, that being said, it's not impossible. So you ask a couple things, what do we see in the year ahead? So uncertainty, the greater the uncertainty lasts in everything from tariffs to economic policy to geopolitical policy. And it seems a function of the administration rather than a temporary part of it to be this way. It is intentional. You're going to see uncertainty across different sectors, across hiring. Build social skills, we learn. Build your skill set. Build skill up. Do things that you can do to make yourself marketable in areas that you haven't done. Your cabinet making ability will be incredibly important, as you point out right now. As you point out, dibs on starting a math rave and nuke the capital in Greenland. That's really good. Melanie, you are always a perpetual delight when it comes to both knowledge of Greenland's geography as well as, of course, well, I call a cabinet making position in, I'll be East, West Greenland's largest cabinet maker. I'll set
And
that
be
up.
in my cabinet of cabinet makers, yeah.
A cabinet of cabinet makers. And so this is gonna be tricky. And so right now, what do we know? We know that the equity markets are still, relatively speaking, in a position of strength. We're worried about the other shoe dropping in the economy. People are concerned in different ways. Don't get caught up in the bad news. Focus on what's real and what's on the ground. And for you individually, your individual experience will vary, but reskill develop those social skills, get in there, network, do everything you can to make that happen. And I think you'll be in a position of strength. Now, regardless of this, we're going to be in this kind of holding pattern thing until something shocks us out of this unexpected geopolitical event, issue involving unanticipated risk from a certain sector that it's hard to anticipate. We don't have that issue yet. The banks look relatively fine. There's not a lot of negative issues on this, but we're looking around this. Watch out for layoffs. Watch out for more distortions in the market. But it's going to be a tough market ahead. It's going to be continued challenges, and that's important for you to engage and to figure this out. Vanita says maybe move to lower cost areas with reduced salaries. Thinking about that trip to Alabama with Albert. Now's the time.
One of the things I think I'm beginning to see as a common theme, and this is very much related to the economics of America, is that, like, so I went through West Virginia last October. I went through coal country, McDowell, Mingo County, very hollowed out neighborhoods where pretty much the pattern is Dollar Tree, Dollar General, a fast food joint, a church, a gas station, and a car repair shop. And then you repeat it every 10 to 15 miles. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. And I think, like, as I think about Alabama, Mississippi, it's that similar story of extraction, right? And I think the thesis I come up with, which has been hammered at a lot, is just that we're a nation of extractors, and as a worker, you hope that you're not extracted too badly, but it's basically a nation of the extractors extracting the extractees. And when you're done with one place, you move on to another. And hopefully, you don't get caught in the undertow of being left behind when the extractors move on.
That's profoundly said, Albert, too. And you're right. This is one of the, as you point out, this is a very profound fact of American economic life.
Yeah,
And I think 30,000 feet, right? Booms exist. Economies drive these areas. People went to these small towns in West Virginia because they felt they had jobs there. They were
yeah,
sources of jobs. And coal mining offered something that, say, farming didn't traditionally do. And then
yeah.
time passes, right? You notice that you're still holding on. You're doing the job that's familiar to you because it's what you've known. And this is the hardest thing about our economy is it's hard to say to somebody who's worked in a coal mine for 30 years, oh, go get a job in the service sector because that's where jobs are, without that requisite series of skills and that adaptation and that technique. And so it's hard for towns to adapt, it's hard for people to adapt, and it's hard to say, look around you and say, is now the time for me to leave? Or do I still try to make a living and eke a living from where I'm at right now? And that is just
And so the
tough.
parallel that I begin to draw is Silicon Valley's tech and AI future, um, the Deep South's cotton fields, the West Virginia's coal mines, and perhaps, West Texas's oil fields. Like, do we make that parallel? And if that is in fact the case, what does it say for the American future? Because we went from slavery to blue collar and now to, like, your white collar, and then what's next?
Fascinating question. And would you know it if you would we know it until that's the hardest part about being in something
Yeah,
because innovation in itself is such a cyclical thing that there are good times and there are bad times. You could say in the year 2000, in the middle of the tech bubble, right? You were
yeah,
looking at this and saying, "Oh man, the Bay Area had a great run for a while, and it's over now." And it wasn't really over, was it? Nothing was over. It was the beginning of something completely different. But then
yeah.
at the same time, so it's very hard to step out of that phase and recognize when something is that way. So right now, even though it's not the best times, what are the facts on the ground? Bay Area still has the largest concentration of VCs, largest concentration of startups, unicorns at all by any metric that we have, still leading in this space.
I mean, yeah, that's the difference,
Right?
right? Is that Alabama, West Virginia, and West Texas don't have Stanford, they don't have Sequoia Capital, they don't have easy access to international markets, and they don't have great weather. But AI doesn't need any of those things to thrive. You could start an AI company in the middle of Bali or in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's all the same thing. as long as you have a data center and an Amazon cloud center to access. And so, Vanita, you were saying, and you're taking that innovation is taking pause. I'm actually the argument that I'm making is that if history doesn't repeat, but it always rhymes, can we make a concerted argument that maybe the Bay Area might reach its ultimate like final destination by way of Alabama, West Texas, West Virginia, and ultimately become a place where people leave in droves and your empty coal mine of West Virginia is the empty office that Google or Intel or Cisco used to occupy, right? Like, are we going to look at that the same way?
Dun dun dun. Only time will. I love that. I love that as a mic drop moment, Albert.
Yeah, right. And so
Next on 60
that's
Minutes.
true. Midland, Texas still has oil. West
It
Texas
does.
has not been fully extracted, so it's not a really great example. But it's the Alabama and West Virginia example that I think, and also the Rust Belt areas of Syracuse, New York, and Southern and Akron, Ohio, and Youngstown, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, right? Like we finished extracting what we could from those places, and so right, like the human mind is one thing, but maybe once you're finished extracting it for all the data and you put it into AI, then you've gone to that other aspect of it. So, um, yeah, so I mean, I think going back to it, right? Like I think I take away from this is that history and the economy is always a constant like moving situation. And I think coming into this year, you and I have been doing this now for at least 5 years now, Dr. White, I think. And generally speaking, we always come into these years feeling like we can come in with some sort of theme, right? I think last year was we hope that the Trump administration will do right by the people and maybe we have a downward glide and then tariffs took over. The previous year, I think, was inflation is softening heading into 2024. Maybe we have our soft landing. 2023 was hoping for that. It went a lot slower. And then 2022, the inflation was just getting really terrible as it hit 9%. And so I feel like for the long-term job seekers also watching here, it's like, well, when is it going to be my turn? When is everything going to actually turn? And in a market where it's like, I think from top to bottom in the Great Recession, it was what, like 2007 to mid 2009, and then all the way back to 2012. So it was that 5 year range. And I feel like maybe we're in the middle of that here, even though it's not like officially an economic recession. It feels like one because the only thing that's keeping GDP up there is AI spending. And so what would you say is sort of because I've been saying in some of my job search webinars the last week or so that if pivot was the year word that you used in 2025, that you should just use it again in 2026 because we're still in some sort of odd spot. And so I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Thanks, Albert. And that's very well stated. We always start each year with some, as you point out, a kind of thematic word, a
We've
kind
been
of.
doing this for a while now.
I feel like this is, as we said, this is our 177th year at Albert's List.
Yes.
Been doing this since Colin found me on the wharf and asked me to do this.
Right, and Colin's
So
over here saying that we're all not going to have jobs by 2028. So, like, I mean,
That's not what I said. I said we're gonna have to change how we interact with our work.
I just read that as we're all going to be jobless and Colin will just own all of us by 2028.
Oh
No, no,
yeah,
no, no,
that's what I heard. No,
no,
I
no,
think
no.
so. Okay, let's bring this down to the Bay Area too in this sense. So I would say this is a year where we'll see world-leading productivity with a lot of local fragility, is what I'll say. And so paradoxical, right? So we're going to see continued productivity growth, use of AI meaningfully, people figuring out how to use AI meaningfully, along persistent things like cost of living strain, which will be a big deal. I think we're going to have a bifurcated labor market. I think we're going to see stagnation in parts of the labor market for reasons that I still believe to what we've linked before are not and they're written off as AI, but not really caused that way. A lot of that driven by macroeconomic uncertainty that's out there, and a lot of jobs that are necessary that keep this going. And I think there's always going to be, and my other word is uncertainty, not just tariffs, but geopolitically. The ramifications of what happens in 2026 will be felt for decades to come.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think that is the bottom line for what we're looking for this year. We're gonna have locally, there's gonna be, I mean, I have everything to say product. I'm very bullish about productivity, but the nature of how those resources get distributed, I'm not.
Yeah.
And that's the question, right? Are we becoming a less equal society because of it? And that's the issue.
Polarized,
Stratified.
absolutely. And Vanita, just this last final point, because I
Oh
kind
yeah,
of am
Anita.
going a little while here, is that she was saying, I think you're saying that innovation is headless and it can happen anywhere, but we need city and human capital infrastructure to support innovation and the cities that support it. And that's actually, I think, maybe the biggest difference is that the difference between San Francisco, West Virginia, Alabama, and Akron is that San Francisco has always been this resilient city that has found a way back from all of these various different things. And I think um, the thought is if we begin to view data, and by that connection, what comes out of the human mind as the same resource as coal and steel, then does the extraction story become any different? And if you look at it that way, then San Francisco could absolutely look like West Virginia in 20 to 30, 40 years' time. And gosh, I'm a local to the Bay Area. I hope that that's not the case, but it's certainly something of grave concern. And so, yeah. So,
So like what you're saying, I could afford real estate in the Bay Area in 30 years then.
I mean, yeah, you would be able to buy a home for $15,000 overlooking the water, but you wouldn't have a job to support you for it.
It'd be a fantastic. So that's amazing. But because of that, though, to that point, it's tough to gather enough retirees and say, let's move to West Virginia. But the mere physical characteristics of the Bay Area alone are enough to, I think, drive. So I think even then, to that evolution, you're going to be better off only because
That's
if
true
it was
because
the
you
case,
still have water and they're not making any
right?
more land, and so you could say, hey, the Bay Area is no longer a tech paradise, but it is now a retirement paradise because there's 300 days of sun per year, and there's lots of hiking, and there's a lot of water, and you can go boating for super cheap, and then it just becomes Miami West, right? So, I guess it's a win-win no matter what at the end of the day that I've now convinced myself into. Um, Peggy says, could San Francisco's extraction be the lack of data centers needed? So, um, hmm. I don't know. I think because the Bay Area has always been like a thinking place, it's just you're extracting what comes out of us as information and knowledge workers, and that data is the new coal, and data is the new oil, right? Somebody told me the other day, and I actually came to this crazy conclusion that we may not necessarily be in an AI bubble, because what we consider as the bubble to be the delta between AI spending and AI revenues is not actually the thing in mind, but rather the fact that we're all inputting all of this data into ChatGPT, Claude, Lovable, etc., to build our apps, to build our systems, to uh, input our ideas, and that the ultimate end game is not to break even on your infrastructure spending and your revenue, but rather to create enough data to sell as in chunks to private equity firms that can then go ahead and scale upon that to build all these apps that will then put all of us individual users out of business. And so, therefore, there's no real, I would say, AI bubble as much as it's just going to be a large scale extraction, and that extraction will then be flipped and used to basically reduce the cost of everything on us And so it won't matter that they spend $10 trillion. It'll just matter that they find a way to rug pull us all at the end, and all of that money will come back by way of us paying them back as consumers on the back end.
Can I pull the rug in that scenario? Or who do you want to
So
pull?
so the thought is like if you
Can
so the
I?
thought is, right, ChatGPT will sell chunks of data at some market price. And if you are a firm that can afford to bid on these chunks of data, then you will get a chunk of that future. And and your ability to afford that chunk will either come from existing income or because you took advantage of the AI revolution. And and you'll be able to flip all of that knowledge that's been now contained there and be your own like private equity firm from that.
Hmm. What are you doing on that same topic? What about all the Albert's list data, Albert?
I mean, yeah, like there's data in
Are,
there too, right? Like
is this
it's
a model? To Melanie's point, is going to be a subscription model, Albert? What's the plan?
right. It's something that we have to pay subscriptions to use everything, right? You're going to have to pay a subscription to use your washer, your dryer, your fridge, your car, to heat your car, to everything, right? Everything becomes a subscription model because somebody vibe coded it and then they flip that vibe code into a private equity firm, Reilly, Chen, and Colin, right? We're going to be that firm that buys those ideas, and then it's up to us to flip those ideas and then help ChatGPT make the money back, but also make more
Hmm.
money on the backside. So therefore, there is no AI bubble. It's merely just an idea extraction so that the highest bidders 3 to 5 years from now can buy that data and then become infinitely wealthy themselves. So,
Ooh.
what do you think
This is
about that, Colin?
exciting.
I am earlier I said I think money
What is money?
so like money doesn't make sense in the long run unless distribution of resources is being handled correctly at the government level. And all this moving around of dollars and zeros and these things, it does like it won't change anything. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is like tangible resources. Whether a house is worth 100K or $10 million, the actual tangible value is the usage of the house. And we're all playing this stupid game of like the number is getting bigger without realizing that the you know at the end of the day, a US dollar bill is the same thing as a monopoly money, except it's guaranteed by a US government and it has tangible usage where the government collects it as tax. And that's like those are the few only real usage of paper money or what's in your bank account. Being able to translate that into an actual tangible resource, an asset, that is the most important thing when it comes to individuals. And right now, I think the problem we have with the wealth gap isn't like billionaires, it's the resource
Yeah,
gap,
yeah,
Hmm.
right?
yeah.
Well said. Uh,
All right, so
So
we're way over. This is a topic for later. Um, Dr. White, your final thoughts as we get into the rest of this month, and what job seekers should think about as they try to avoid thinking of doom.
right. So first of all, rough road ahead for the next year. Make sure you've got a good set of tires as you go on that road, and a great set of cabinet making contacts for your backup career in apprentice cabinet making. And I appreciate you all so much for being here today. It makes me incredibly joyful. All of your questions and your interactions. I read them all, even if I don't respond to them all, and they all bring me joy. So thank you guys for being here. And thank you, Albert and Colin. I love the follow-up discussion, and I want to invade it, but then I'm just going to take up more time. So this is great. I love it. This is great. Thank
All
you
thank you
right.
guys.
everyone for
Well,
staying.
wonderful. We have next month's webinar up and live now. It is going to be Wednesday, February 18th. So come back. We'll have more insights. We'll have more data. We'll see how things are advancing as the year comes through. This webinar has been recorded, and you also know how to connect with Dr. White. So we wish you a wonderful remainder of your week, remainder of your month. We hope that you've gotten off to a good start here in 2026, and we look forward to chatting with you all soon. See you all later, and good luck to you all. Goodbye.
And bring the cabinets with you
And
next
bring the
next meeting.
Bring the cabinets.
And I want to see what you guys make this month. Let's do it.
Bring
We'll
the
compare.
cabinets next month, yes. Even if they're AI generated. All right, see you all. Bye.